Celebi's time travel loop. Celebi is the voice of the forest, a mythical Pokemon with one ability that breaks every rule of physics the Pokemon world has ever tried to establish. It can travel freely through time, landing in any era it chooses with zero explanation required. In the fourth Pokemon movie from 2001, Celebi arrives in the forest injured, gets pulled into Ash's present, and then drags both Ash and a boy named Sammy deep into the past to escape the Iron-Masked Marauder, a ruthless poacher who eventually captures and corrupts a future version of Celebi using dark energy. Here's where it gets interesting. Multiple Celebis appear simultaneously across different points in the film, suggesting that the same Celebi has visited this forest dozens of times across dozens of eras, layering its own history on top of itself. The Ilex Forest acts as its anchor, the one fixed point it keeps returning to across centuries. And the loop is completely closed. The rescue only happened because Celebi already traveled back, which means Celebi traveled back because the rescue already happened. No origin, no first cause, just an endless spiral of the same event repeating forever. Ash meets young Professor Oak. The immediate consequence of Celebi's loop is one of the most quietly mind-bending moments in the entire franchise. The boy Ash meets in the past, the one he befriends and travels with through the ancient Ilex Forest, is named Sammy. And partway through the film, it becomes obvious that Sammy is a young Samuel Oak, the professor who sent Ash on his journey in the first place. The sketchbook Sammy carries, filled with drawings of Pokemon he's observed, matches artwork later attributed to Professor Oak in his early career. Neither of them fully processes what this means while it's happening. When Celebi finally returns Ash to the present, Sammy is left in the past with his memories completely intact, which means Oak has spent approximately 40 years knowing that he once traveled through a forest with the same kid he would eventually send out into the world. He handed Ash his starter Pokemon fully aware of this. He never mentioned it once. Whether that's a predestination paradox or just Oak being deeply weird about it is genuinely unclear, but either way, every interaction they ever had carries that weight. Dialga and the distortion of Sinnoh's timeline. Dialga is not just a Pokemon that happens to be associated with time. According to its Pokédex entries, its heartbeat literally controls the flow of time itself. The moment its heart stops, time stops. That is the creature that Cyrus, leader of Team Galactic, attempts to chain and enslave at the top of Mount Coronet in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Using the red chain, forged from the crystallized essence of the three Lake Guardians, Cyrus summons both Dialga and Palkia simultaneously at the Spear Pillar, intending to collapse the existing universe and rebuild it as one without spirit or emotion. When both legendaries are forcibly called at once, space-time begins visibly tearing apart. The sky above Sinnoh cracks open with purple and gold fractures, while reality destabilizes around them. Giratina, the embodiment of antimatter from the distortion world, a dimension that exists completely outside the flow of time, drags Cyrus through a rift and traps him there. The player calms Dialga and Palkia before the damage becomes irreversible. The timeline is restored. But the fact that a single human came within seconds of unmaking causality with a stolen leash is genuinely staggering when you stop to think about it. The Time Gears Crisis, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky builds the most mechanically coherent time travel story in the franchise, and it starts with a simple premise. 5 time gears exist in the world, each one maintaining the flow of time in a specific region. Remove a gear and that region freezes, not metaphorically, but literally. Every leaf, every raindrop, every living thing locked in place mid-motion forever. The villain of the story is Primal Dialga, a corrupted version of Dialga from a ruined future where Temporal Tower has already collapsed and time has stopped almost everywhere. Primal Dialga has lost all higher reasoning and now operates purely on instinct, sending Dusknoir back in time to eliminate the player and Grovyle before they can prevent the collapse. The twist is that the player themselves is a time traveler, a human from that same ruined future who was transformed into a Pokémon during the journey back, with no memory of any of it. Grovyle is your partner from the future. You were both sent back specifically to steal the Time Gears and restore Temporal Tower. Defeating Primal Dialga rewrites the timeline successfully, but the cost is that the player's future self, the one who made the journey, begins to disappear entirely because the future that produced them no longer happens. Dialga, restored to its true form, intervenes at the last moment and brings the player back, but the erasure nearly completes before it does. The Darkrai Revelation. The base Explorers games present the planet's paralysis as a kind of inevitable tragedy, a tower collapsing under its own entropy. Explorers of Sky, released in 2009, retcons that entirely. The special episode called In the Future of Darkness follows Grovyle and Dusknoir cooperating in the ruined future timeline, and through it, the true architect of Temporal Tower's collapse is revealed. Darkrai. Using his ability to inflict nightmares, Darkrai manipulated events from the shadows over an extended period, deliberately engineering the conditions that would cause the tower to fall. What looked like a natural disaster was a calculated act. The most unsettling part is his motive. Darkrai wanted to be loved and sought to remake the world in a form that would accept him, which puts him in a strange category of villain where the destruction of all of time is essentially a deeply broken response to loneliness. Sky also expands the Hidden Land sequence with more detail on exactly how the time travel mechanism functions, framing the journey through the passage of time as a one-way trip that physically burns the traveler's existence down to almost nothing by the time they arrive. Legends. Arceus, the modern trainer in ancient Sinnoh Pokémon. Legends. Arceus opens with no tutorial, no town, and no explanation. The player character is simply thrown through a crack in the sky, a swirling gold and purple space-time rift, and lands in Hisui, the region that will eventually become modern Sinnoh, thousands of years before the events of Diamond and Pearl. The mechanism is Arceus itself, which is confirmed at the endgame to have specifically selected the player and pulled them backward through time for a purpose. The instability driving the main plot is a frenzied Dialga, or Palkia, depending on which version you're playing, whose origin form, a massive, mechanical, clock-shaped dragon, is warping time and space across the region in concentric waves, causing the noble Pokémon to lose their minds. The red chain reappears here, being forged in ancient Hisui for what seems like the first time, adding a layer of retroactive weight to its role in Diamond and Pearl. At the end, Arceus tells the player they now belong to this era. Whether that means the player can never return to their original time, or whether Arceus is simply acknowledging a new fixed point, the game leaves deliberately and maddeningly open. The Paradox Pokémon. At the bottom of the Great Crater of Paldea, beneath layers of terrestrial crystal and ancient rock, there is a time machine. It was built by the player's professor, a researcher named Sada in Scarlet or Turo in Violet, who has been dead for years by the time the game begins, replaced by an AI copy running on a self-sustaining loop and continuing the machine's operation long past any rational purpose. In Scarlet, the machine pulls Pokémon from the ancient past, enormous prehistoric variants of modern species with bone plating, exaggerated physical features, and no memory of the present. In Violet, it pulls from the far future, sleek, mechanical versions of the same species built from chrome and circuitry, equally displaced and equally confused. These are not alternate forms or regional variants. They are genuinely different creatures from genuinely different eras, now stranded in a time that has no place for them. By the time the player destroys the machine and stops the AI professor, dozens of Paradox Pokémon are already loose across Paldea with no way back. The ancient ones and the future ones remain in the present permanently, living artifacts of a timeline rupture that cannot be undone. Ultra wormholes as temporal displacement. Ultra wormholes in Pokemon Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon are primarily framed as spatial, tunnels connecting different dimensions, used by Ultra Beasts and the Ultra Recon Squad to travel between worlds. But the dimensional physics implied by the games stretch further than that. Solgaleo and Lunala open wormholes by physically converting their own bodies into the tunnel, making them living gates through the fabric of reality. And the dimensions reachable through those gates operate under entirely different physical laws than the main Pokemon world. The Ultra Recon Squad comes from Ultra Megalopolis, a civilization that lost its light when Necrozma drained it. A city of skyscrapers in permanent darkness, from a timeline where a causal chain ran to completion and left nothing behind. Necrozma itself, in its Ultra form fused with Solgaleo or Lunala, is effectively hijacking a dimension-crossing engine and pushing it beyond its designed limits. Whether Ultra wormholes can connect different points in time as well as different dimensions is never stated outright, but the implication that some reach dimensions exist outside normal causality entirely is present in both the game dialogue and several Pokédex entries, and the distinction between different dimension and different era gets thinner the deeper into Ultra space you go. Arceus and the creation loop. Here is the problem at the center of the entire Pokemon universe's relationship with time. Arceus is said to have created everything from nothing, including Dialga, the physical embodiment of time itself. But legends. Arceus shows Arceus operating within time, watching the player, testing them, communicating across eras, choosing a specific moment to intervene. If Arceus created time, it should exist outside of it. If it exists outside of it, it has no before or after, no sequence of decisions, no moment of creation, and yet it acts like a being with intentions, patience, and a plan. The azure flute that Arceus gifts the player appears in Legends. Arceus in a context that connects it directly back to its role in Diamond and Pearl, tying the ancient past of Hisui to the modern events of Sinnoh in a loop with no clear starting point. Arceus tells the player their arrival was predetermined, that the encounter had already been arranged before the player was born. If Arceus arranged it, and Arceus was created at the beginning of the universe, and the beginning of the universe hadn't happened yet when it made the arrangement, then the entire Pokemon universe is a self-caused loop, existing because it exists, beginning because it already ended. With Arceus at the center of a paradox so large it contains everything else on this list inside it. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.